Hello and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. To start off, I just want to say I hope you Americans watching this have had a very good Independence Day on the 4th of July, and I hope you've spent some good time with your friends and family on the Independence Day. So, with that little short bit out of the way, let's talk about Steve Winwood, who has something of a particularly interesting career. Basically starting out as just a member of several groups across the 60s and 70s, in bands such as Blind Faith, Traffic, and the Spencer Davis Group, before hitting it big in solo by the 1980s. A similar way I could think of to describe him would be Diet Phil Collins, or his more sophisticated cousin. Not in a bad way, of course, more of a compliment. Just that he's managed to capture, in some ways, he managed to take the aspects of pop music and kind of spin it into his own style, while making it very diverse and very popular. Hence why he's had some good singles, such as Valerie, which was back in like 1982, which many will know for being sampled by Eric Prydz for his track Call on Me. And then we talk about the album today, which, fittingly enough, was released about 35 years ago, of course, and pretty much the exact same day as the previous album I looked at, which happens to be titled Back in the High Life. Cover is pretty simple, just a simple snapshot of old Stevie himself, presumably shot and directed by a man named, if I'm to recall, a Mr. Jeffrey Kent Ayeroff, who also did the cover for Hunting High and Low by Aha, which came out the previous year. There are also some very well shot photos of himself and other people, which look very dynamic. The strong contrast in the lighting department, both the silhouetted people and the very bright scenery, do offer a good tonatic atmosphere, and almost could very well each themselves do just as well as the cover. But anyways, with all that said, let's start talking about the music itself. Beginning with probably the most famous song on the album, and probably Steve Winwood's most popular track, Higher Love. This one doesn't really need much of an introduction. It topped charts back at 86, it won many Grammy Awards, and it's not hard to see why. It is a simple yet very catchy tune, and most of that's probably due not only to Steve Winwood's talented vocals and songwriting, but also the backing vocals of Chaka Khan and the rhythm guitars of Nile Rodgers of Chic fame. Yes, Chaka Khan and Nile Rodgers. If there's a match made in heaven, this is one that comes pretty close. I also like to give props to John Robinson, or GR for short, for doing the impromptu drum bits for the song. He's pretty much a well-known session drummer in the music industry, what being hired for many great records of many styles, including Off the Wall by Michael Jackson and one of its singles, Rock With You. And apparently, the opening drum fill at the beginning of Higher Love was apparently thought up by accident. Apparently one of the producers or audio engineers or someone apparently encouraged Robinson to put this drum fill at the beginning for Steve Winwood, and they just kind of went along with it. So similar to the gated drums of Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight and Peter Gabriel's Intruder, it's just going to show that some of the most famous and innovative sounds can just come up by accident. But aside from that though, the song itself just screams summertime optimism and fun, especially with those synthesized horns and those middle-aged synth bass that kind of remind me a bit of Tusk by Fleetwood Mac. And with all this considered, it's no wonder that the late great Winston Houston did a cover of this song a few years later, and it would get remixed just a couple of years earlier. Next we have Take It As It Comes. Continuing on the very light-heartedness of Higher Love, this song kind of goes in a more broader tone, if you get what I mean. We still have the bright fun brass and even a bit of the organs and that groovy guitar solo at the end. But some of its lyrics kind of go for a more genuine upbringing approach. It kind of goes into how no matter how much your heart may be broken or how much relationships you try to make work but not succeed, there'll always be someone out there for you, someone to commit in a relationship to. And if you suffer from a broken heart, you gotta take it as it comes, as the chorus would say. And it is generally just as optimistic as Higher Love, and this is another one that I think could have been just another good single off the album as Higher Love and most of the other songs that I'll be talking over for this album. Speaking of, one other positive I'll give to this is that it actually uses authentic brass instruments like trombones and trumpets, as opposed to the synth horns used in the previous song. Not that I have anything against synthesizers and trying to emulate and replicate actual instruments, mostly to either save time and money and people and work and all that. I just think it's good to have a balance of something more, well, like I said, something authentic and genuine, and, for lack of a better term, the real deal. Plus, as I mentioned before, how the guitars and the brass kind of come together in this harmonic call and answer at the end is nothing but a good conclusion to the song. Anyway, that leads us to the next song, Freedom Overspill. Speaking of, is it really possible for freedom to actually spill if it were, actual physical object? How does one weigh freedom? Would you measure it in liters, kilos? I don't know. Well, anyways, this one's slightly different from the previous tracks. While not all bombastic, it still has the similar trademark sounds that we've established so far in the album, but this time goes for a different tone and mood. Slightly more dramatic, bit more nightlife in a way, especially with the synth taking better emphasis and even a bit of the Hammond organ by Steve himself. The lyrics themselves seem to be something of a tongue-in-cheek commentary on people who rather try to talk about anything and everything that's on their mind, whether if it's just a train of thought or a confession or truth or anything, as long as they get the attention of people and people are listening to them. And funny enough, one of the songwriters for this was George Fleming, the nephew of James Bond creator himself, Ian Fleming. So yeah, this combined and a certain comment I said in the previous episode, this probably was the closest thing Steve Winwood would have done to make a James Bond theme song. But, wishful thinking. However, this song did end up in a few films in '87, in particular the comedy film Big Shot and the Ridley Scott film Someone to Watch Over Me. And it's kind of not hard to see why. This song does have that kind of 80s kind of neo-noir thriller kind of vibe, like almost Miami Vice, like driving in a police car through like a nightlit city or street. It has that kind of feeling to it, and I'm a I'm a sucker for those kind of moody tracks. And then that leads us to what could probably be considered the title track of the album, sort of, Back in the High Life Again. So, could it be considered a title track, seeing as it's added another word to it? I don't know. In any case, this one's a good closer to the first side of the album, with the prominent mandolin by Winwood himself and his vocals that seem to channel Phil Collins, and the almost triumphant yet still very bittersweet synth that kind of overlaid the song. If I were to speculate, if Steve Hackett had never left Genesis, I think something like a song like this would probably what Genesis would have sounded like in the 80s, with albums like the Mama album and Invisible Touch. And yet I think this is also about how Steve Winwood is kind of looking back at his life as a rock as a in a way a rock pop star, both as a member of other bands and his own solo career, and just kind of look at it through nostalgic goggles, and just acknowledging and realizing the mistakes and regrets he has made in the past, but he's always willing to still do good and still do better, hence going back in the high life, which may represent the fame, fortune, and popularity that he might have had and endured for most of the time up to that point. And the question is fame and fortune really all that important? Is that really the big motivator of making music, or do you just want to make music just to be inspired or to inspire other people? Side 2 begins with The Finer Things. Probably one of the more underrated tracks of the song. This is without a doubt pure soft rock at its finest. It's pure blue-eyed soul, and it's beautiful. It begins with a very soft and graceful synth note, or like a synth melody that feels a bit reminiscent of Phil Collins' "Another Day in Paradise," the opening of that song in particular. And Steve Winwood's vocals kick in, and you think it's gonna be just a soft, quiet, and tranquil piece. Then about a minute and a half in, the drums and the bass kick in, and it juxtaposes into this natural yet very jumpy and very light tone, and just almost for lack of a better word, it just feels jumpy and fun and optimistic. And some of the lyrics kind of reflect that, with things like how Steve wants to commit himself to this other person, this soulmate, and how it's more to a relationship than just being physical or sexual, but there's also an intimacy, just wanting to commit to someone, wanting to spend your life with someone. Life's too short, so it's best not to take the things you have in life for granted. Just appreciate them, because you won't be around forever, and those things won't be around forever either. And no matter what, finer things will shine through no matter what. And like I said, the music really reflect and emphasize that kind of bittersweet tone that kind of continues off where Higher Love and Back in the High Life Again kind of leaves off in a way. While it makes up for minimal, if not very tiny use of guitars and pretty much zero brass at all compared to previous tracks, it makes up for with very well done synth melodies that kind of remind me a bit of something out of Balance of Power by the Electric Light Orchestra. by the way, next week, another ELO album. While I'm more into the more rockier metal music, even of this era, the synth here is still very uplifting and, like I said, very bittersweet, and it helps kind of enhance that kind of almost happy tone, and combined with such lyrics and being a way kind of following up on the themes of higher love and back in the high life, that sense of nostalgia, but also trying to move on and trying to commit to something that you want to do for other people. This is one I think many people could still relate to. And then we have Wake Me Up on Judgment Day. And I imagine Steve must have waited that long over the 5 years if he told people to wake him up by the time Terminator 2 came out, but hey, worth the wait. Anyways, much like the finer things, this is another more dramatic and underrated song of the album. It seems to speak of a stranger who's in a kind of denial of all the issues and problems that are going on around him in the world and whatnot, and how it can easily come to a point where such things become too much that they'll eventually hit you in the face, hit you right in the head. It's kind of all about the inevitable and how it can be delayed and how it can hit so hard, as well as how in a way we have to trust and listen to other people, to strangers, even if they may say or think things that we may not entirely agree with, and how this person is sleeping and is telling us to wake him by Judgment Day, and how we'd rather believe in a sweet, harmless lie or a harsh, more unforgiving truth. And music itself still manages to keep that kind of jumpy, bouncy tone. Almost reminds me a bit of King of Wishful Thinking by Go West, especially with its very funky-ish bass and the very catchy percussion beat and that very distinct kind of chorus. If you like Go West, I think you'll like this one. And overall, this and Final Things are definitely songs I would probably listen to any day. They're very underrated. I think this should have been a single off the album. After that, we have Split Decision. The closest thing Steve ever got to pure rock on this album. We get the return of not only some guitars, this time by John Walsh of Eagle Strain, but also the Hammond organ from the Freedom Overspill returning. The lyrics themselves a bit more minimalist in question, much like Wake Me Up on Judgment Day, this time being about a person or a couple of people having contradicting thoughts and decisions, with lines like, one man is a real one, the other wants to hide. One man has his mind made up, the other can't decide. It's almost kind of a allegory or commentary on like multiple personality disorder, or like just having an alter ego, or even say the Jungian theories of the shadows and of anima and animus, and just kind of how, as the chorus would go, it's a very fine line. The matter of it is, where do you go? Which decision will you choose? And it's another one that many, like myself, could find very relatable. Sometimes in life, decisions aren't so easy. Even a simple yes or no question isn't exactly as easy as it may sound or one may think at first glance. Plus, with John Walsh's signature guitar solos, and you're in for a rocking good track. And then that leaves us with the final song of the album, My Love's Leavin'. This song's much more calmer, more mellow and easygoing compared to all the other tracks of this album. It's definitely more of a soft pop song in comparison. And there's also evident in how it has drum machines and synth strings as opposed to actual strings and actual percussion in it. But I won't entirely hold that against it, as its lyrics put a bit of a spin on the whole breakup song. At first glance, it seems to be about this person kind of bathing in sorrow over how his partner's left him, the empty bed she left behind, it's cold on one side. However, over the course of the song and its lyrics, it starts to get a bit more uplifting, more open, as if this person has actually struggled in this relationship and is finally free of it, has feeling this breath of fresh air with I find faith in healing, I'll find hope singing, and I'll cope with today, and you've got a bit of an interesting deconstruction of the conventional breakup love song and all that. So it's kind of an interesting way to close out an album that's otherwise mostly about uplifting and finding new love. In fact, I would compare this lyrically to Take It As It Comes, as it might be about moving on and breaking out of an old relationship to be in a new one, a more fresher and hopefully less toxic one. So anyways, this album is actually pretty brilliant for an album of its era. At first, some may brush it off as just classic 80s pop cheese, but when you actually get down to actually listen to it, it's actually more to it than that. It shows that this kind of music can be pretty good if you just look and listen in the right places. And Steve Winwood's Back in the High Life is no exception. If you're nostalgic for that kind of music, or you just want to have fun, or play at a party with friends and whatnot, and have a bit of a dance off, I'd say give this album a go and give it a whirl. It'll bring you back to good times. It'll bring you back to the highlight. Next time we continue looking at 80s albums by traveling into the past and then into the future, which is still far off to be our present yet. We look at another album by the Electric Light Orchestra.